Today, we're going to journey to the legendary kingdom of Samarkand for a fable that feels truly timeless. It's a powerful story about how a prince's pride can unleash something terrible, and how only the most unshakable faith could ever hope to conquer it. So, what really happens when a ruler's son, someone with everything, lets his arrogance completely take over? Well, in this story, it sets in motion a terrifying chain of events that, believe it or not, gives birth to an actual monster of smoke and fire. All right, so let's set the scene. Our story begins in this prosperous, beautiful kingdom. It's ruled by a really just sultan, but he has a son, Prince Joran, who is, well, he's dangerously arrogant. On one hand, you have Sultan Caspian. He was the very model of fairness and mercy, and his people absolutely loved him for it. But his son, Prince Joran, he was the complete opposite. He was so blinded by his wealth and power, so consumed by pride, that he honestly saw the common people as nothing more than insects to be crushed beneath his feet. You know, the prince's vanity had no limits, so he decides he's going to build the most magnificent garden the world has ever seen. But there was just one little problem. A small, humble hut stood right in the middle of the land he wanted. Now, this wasn't just any old shack. It belonged to a wise old sage named Rahim, who used it as a free school for orphan children. So, when Rahim the sage humbly explained that he couldn't just abandon the orphan's only shelter, the prince's pride took a massive hit. You could almost hear him thinking, "How dare this beggar defy me?" He became blind with rage, got on his horse, and decided he was going to handle this personally. He arrives, and ignoring the sage's pleas, ignoring the tears of these terrified children, Prince Joran gives this one single, monstrous order to his guards: burn it to the ground. And he laughed. He actually laughed as he watched the orphan's only home turn to ash. It was right then, in that moment of heartbreak, that the sage cried out to the heavens. And from the ashes of that unbelievably cruel and heartless act, a terrible and, you could say, a fitting curse was born. A price had to be paid for the prince's cruelty. With tears just streaming down his face, Rahim the sage pronounced a curse that was almost like a dark poem, perfectly mirroring the prince's own dark heart. He declared that the prince's precious, handsome body would transform every single night into a monstrous Shadow Jinn, a creature born from the very smoke and fire he seemed to enjoy so much. The prince, of course, just laughed it off. But that very same evening, the curse came true. As the call to prayer echoed across the city, this searing, unbearable pain shot through his body. Black, foul-smelling smoke started pouring from his skin, and within moments his handsome form twisted and grew into a horrifying 10-foot-tall jinn, a monster made of shadow with eyes like burning hot coals. From then on, every single night was a living nightmare. This jinn would just erupt in a mindless, violent rage, destroying his own royal chambers. And then, just as the first light of dawn would appear, he'd collapse, back in his human form, just weeping in shame and absolute terror. His father, the Sultan, heartbroken, had no choice but to lock him in a reinforced room every evening. They tried everything, all the magic, all the medicine, all the prayers in the kingdom, and nothing worked. But there was a tiny sliver of hope. The sage's curse had a kind of escape clause. Redemption was possible, but it could only be granted through the selfless act of a truly pious woman. Completely desperate, the Sultan made a public announcement across the entire kingdom. He offered half his kingdom, unimaginable wealth, to any good woman who would willingly marry the prince, knowing full well that she'd be spending her nights locked in a room with a monster. I mean, who would ever accept a deal like that? While the answer came from the most unlikely place imaginable. A young orphan named Zainab was struggling to care for her two younger siblings. She was trapped in this crippling debt to a cruel landlord who was threatening to sell all of them into slavery. So for her, the Sultan's terrifying offer, it wasn't a death sentence. It was a lifeline from God, a way to save her family. So on their wedding night, as the sun went down and the prince began that horrifying transformation, Zainab didn't scream. She didn't try to run. She just calmly performed her ablutions, laid out her prayer mat, and began to recite the Holy Quran. And the sound of those sacred words, it stunned the beast. Its furious roars just quieted down, the rage subsided, and it sank to the floor, just whimpering until dawn came. But here's the thing. While Zainab's incredible faith could soothe the beast, it couldn't actually break the curse. The royal scholars realized the prince's journey wasn't over. Two more things had to happen. First, the prince had to personally go and seek the sage's forgiveness. And then, they had to survive one last, absolutely terrible night. Now, stripped of all his pride, the humbled prince journeyed to find Rahim the sage. He literally fell at the old man's feet and begged for forgiveness. And the sage, seeing that his repentance was sincere, he freely gave it. But that final and most dangerous test was still to come. The sage then laid out the terrifying rules for this final trial. He warned them, listen, on this last night, the jinn won't just be a monster of rage. It's going to be a vessel for pure demonic evil. Zainab had to face this ultimate horror with the prince, alone, on the very patch of scorched earth where the hut once stood. And if her faith wavered for even a second, if she ran, the prince would be lost forever. That night was worse than anyone could have possibly imagined. The jinn that emerged was bigger, it was fiercer, a 15-foot monster of pure, unholy rage that seemed completely immune to her prayers. And just as it lunged forward, claws outstretched, ready to literally tear her apart, Zainab closed her eyes, fell to the ground in prostration, and made one final, desperate prayer for deliverance. And in that very moment, her faith was answered. The sky split open, and this pillar of brilliant, divine light just slammed down into the jinn. The creature let out this unearthly scream as the holy light burned away all the smoke, all the fire, and all the evil inside it. When dawn broke, the monster was gone, and in its place lay Prince Joran, fully human and finally free. You know, this incredible story leaves us with 4 really powerful, timeless lessons. First, that pride is a self-destructive poison. Second, that the cries of the wronged and the oppressed are always heard. Third, that sincere repentance has the power to wash away even the greatest sins. And finally, that unwavering faith truly can conquer the darkest evils imaginable. And Prince Joran's life was completely transformed. He dedicated himself to serving others, building a grand school for orphans on the very same land he once destroyed in his arrogance. He went on to become a king known for his legendary justice and humility, with Queen Zainab, the orphan who saved him, ruling right there by his side. So the story of Prince Joran and Zainab really leaves us to think about this eternal conflict, right? The destructive power of human arrogance and hate versus the incredible, redemptive power of sincere faith. And it just makes you wonder, which one is truly stronger?